Thanks. So before I get started today, I want to talk to the people that are going to watch this talk later this week. All y'all who are showing up on Sunday morning don't know that we have somewhere between 12 and 40 people who watch later. And if they don't show up next Sunday morning during this time, they don't get to see what we do next week. Because next week it's live only. Because it's 9 or 10 songs by the band. And we don't have a license to show music, so we don't. And it's like 7 people standing here with the microphone, not me. So, live only next week. If you want to see it, you got to show up. You don't have to be in the room, but you got to be in the room or you got to be on the other end of that camera. So, you've been warned. So, all y'all who don't show up in person and watch it later, all 40 of you, you got to be here. So, today I'm going to be talking about how we do or be better. And I realize better is quite a loaded word because it can bring up a whole lot of old stories, garbage thinking, about what society thinks we ought to do or what somebody else, usually a adult person, told us we ought to be doing. And that's expectations, right? It's also that garbage blame and shame and guilt and oughta, shoulda, coulda, blah, blah, blah. And it's not actually what's important. What's actually important is what we think we should be doing. Does that make you scared? Because really, it's our decision of what is ours to do. And if you're alive, you still have something to do. It might be experiencing joy. It might be recognizing beauty. It might be kindness. It might be just saying hi to somebody who doesn't feel appreciated. It doesn't have to be this grand, magnificent, huge, monstrous thing. Because really, what's big? What's big might be simply the recognition of the light of God in somebody else's eyes. And that might be the thing that changes their world. You don't know. You can't know. It's not yours to know. Our job is to do us. And the only one who can know whether or not we're doing it is us, which puts it on us. So we get to decide what doing better, being better, showing up better means. There's a quote that most of y'all know. The author's name is Antonio Machado. The quote goes, "Travelers, there is no path. Paths are made by walking." Now, Machado was a Spanish poet. Wrote a lot of stuff from the 1900s to the 1920s. A lot of his poems were set to music. And he believed, and I thought this was so lovely, that intuition was more important than knowledge. Have we heard that before? And so he left us this awareness. Paths are made by walking. Nobody can tell us what our life path is. Well, they can try. But it doesn't mean that because they say so, it is. It just means that we get to decide what our path is. And that's either wonderful or horrible. Depends on your point of view. And if you're not used to being the one in charge of you, it's kind of a scary idea. So how do we learn to be grateful for this charge we have of being our own guidepost. And how do we learn to be able to be grateful for this recognition that when we see better, when we know better, we be better and we do better? It's mostly about paying attention to our lives, right? And seeing what really is our motivating factor, rather than some old story of shoulda, coulda, oughta, woulda, blah, blah, blah. And just in case you're wondering where you heard that quote from before, know better, be better, do better, it came from a conversation between Maya Angelou and Oprah Winfrey. Maya was the guide, and Oprah was the baby. And Oprah was sitting there talking to her and said, I screwed up so many times in my 20s. And I didn't know. And Maya looked at her and said, well, when you know better, you do better. And that became embedded in our culture. When you know better, you do better. And it's not about beating yourself up for what you didn't know. It's about when you know better, you do better. And so each one of us gets to pay attention to our lives, pay attention to what we know now that we didn't know before, and then act accordingly. So yesterday morning, it was my turn to do daily morning practice. I've kept Saturday. I gave the rest of the days away. We've been doing that well over 1,000 days now. It's so cool. But it was my turn, because it's Saturday morning and I'm working anyway, so I might as well. And I'm asleep, right? I'm just dead asleep, and my phone rings. I'm thinking, why would somebody be calling me at 6:30 in the morning? And then I focused my eyes and I said, oh, it's 8:30. Well, I guess I better get up because it's time for daily morning practice. Who would have thought I would have slept 10 and a half hours? That's not something I've done since I was 20. And yet I must have needed it, right? So here's the thing. I get up, I don't turn my camera on because I'm not fit for human observation straight out of bed. And I do the reading, but I hadn't opened the Zoom room because I was still asleep. And I hadn't set up that particular Zoom room to be open on its own. For this Zoom room that's running right now, there was a way to set it so that it could open regardless of whether the host showed up or not. And I hadn't set up the second room that way because, frankly, I didn't know it wasn't set up that way. So we did morning practice. And then I went back and I fixed the thing that wasn't fixed because I didn't know it was broken. And we do that. And it's without any angst. It's just, oh, I can fix that now. And so now it doesn't matter if the host happens to oversleep. Somebody else can, pick up the baton and they can carry on. Of course, I'm really glad they woke me up because otherwise I'd have really been behind yesterday. So I've been, when it's my turn, the first thing I look at is Science of Mind magazine. And if I happen to like the reading, that's the one I use. If not, there's a whole bunch of other books. But this month, the readings are by Dennis Merritt Jones, who's written a couple of books that we've used in book studies. And the opening quote for yesterday was from The Art of Being, a book that we used in a class and on Sundays back in 2021. And the quote, every human being's purpose is identical. Every human being's purpose is identical. To be the Spirit of God manifesting in the human condition. We show up as God, that's our purpose. Specifically how that works, it's ours to choose. But our job is to show up as God. Does that make you crazy? A little bit. Does that give you the feeling of empowerment? Maybe. Does that make you wonder what on earth? Maybe. Because we show up as God as us. So what's the rest of his quote? As you awaken to being, your entire perspective of life changes. Some teachers have referred to this shift in perception as going from seeing yourself as a human being stuck in the human condition, struggling to have a spiritual experience, shifting to knowing that you were already a spiritual being, having a divinely human experience. That's why we're here, to become conscious vessels through which heaven touches the earth. So how do we become conscious vessels? We wake up. We decide to pay attention. We decide to live in alignment with our divine nature. And how do we do that? It's a process. It's a practice. It's a thing. We pay attention. And then we decide how to act accordingly. So I'm going to repeat the spiritual thought that I read earlier from Dr. Holmes, from It Can Happen to You. Page 17. Your thought is the pattern, or the mold, through which the power greater than you are, which is one of his code names for God, flows into form. Come on, papers, move. And manifests in your life. Your entire experience is filled with your creative thought, which have become tangible. The thoughts in your mind, the creative thoughts in your minds, become tangible as your life. If you don't like the situations you may find yourself in, change your thinking, and you will bring out a corresponding change in your conditions. It's so simple, but it's not, right? Is becoming a conscious vessel through which heaven touches the earth an experience you would like to have more of? Some experience you would like to become? Think about your answer. What does that mean to you? And is that thought limiting to you? According to our Declaration of Principles that Holmes wrote back in 1927, we're already spiritual beings. We're already divine beings. His exact citation goes, we believe in the individualization of the Spirit in us, and that all people are individualizations of that one Spirit. And a second one, we believe that heaven is within us, and that we experience it to the degree we become conscious of it. There's nothing at all we have to do to be good enough to be conscious vessels through which heaven touches earth, except decide that we mean to live that way. So how do you know you're living that way? There's a little bitty book, a skinny little book, written by Dr. Holmes, also edited by Willis Kinnear, called Freedom from Stress. On page 56, Holmes wrote, life unfolds from within. I do not know how or why it does this. What difference does the how or why make? It does it. And if there is such a principle, and many people have proved that there is, the thing to do is not to argue with it, but to use it, to replace every negative idea by creating an affirmative one. We have placed a curse on our experience through our negative thinking. We must bless it and praise it. We must mentally enjoy it before we can actually partake of that which we wish to experience. I had a really curious thing happen on Thursday at my house. I was working at home like we do. We learned in the pandemic years that you didn't have to go to work. You could work at home. And I was, working and minding my own sweet business. And I got this urge to drive to town. I had no reason to drive to town. It's 20 miles. But I had this urge to drive to town. It's like, what? I don't need to go to town. It's like, you need to go to town. No, I don't want to. No. You need to go to town. Okay, fine. Why am I going to town? You need bananas. I'm not driving to town for bananas. That's just stupid. You need to go to town. Okay, fine. I'll go to town. So I get in my car, and I drive to town, and the little tire pressure light comes on. I'm thinking, well, it's cold. You know, the tire pressure light comes on when it's cold. So I flip the little lever over to where it tells me that how much air is in the tires, and it's like one of them is really low. So I think, well, since I'm going to town anyway, thank you for telling me to go to town, I'll just go to Discount Tire and have them fix it. Put air in it, it'll be fine. So I'm in the line to get air at Discount Tire, and there is a line because it's cold and everybody's tires are low, and I'm watching the little number drop in my car. It's like, I guess that's probably a hole. So I get out of line and I park and I go in and I tell the nice man that I probably have a nail or something, and they take it in the back and they fix it. If I had not listened to that voice and gone to town in a day when I really had time, I would have been screwed the next day because I had a whole list of things to do. Can I be grateful for the nail? Yeah. Can I be grateful for the intuitive hit? Absolutely. Can I be grateful that Discount Tire had time to fix my tire? You betcha. And I bought bananas, right? So we get to decide how we see our days. And we get to decide to feel blessed in them. And that's choice. We get to decide how to see it. And I could have been like grumpy about it, and grumpy that the man asked me if I'd bought the tires there. And I said, well, no, actually, it's a new car, and so the tires didn't come from you. They came from the dealership. But it's like, but I've been a customer here forever, so. And he looked me up, and lo and behold, yes, I was. No biggie. So being grateful for being in life and being able to see it as a benefit, as a positive, is a choice. Gee, that sounds a lot like gratitude. Go figure. So the next paragraph from Dr. Holmes, from Freedom from Stress. The Spirit urges us to righteousness. But what does righteousness mean? It means right relationship with ourselves, with our fellow beings, and the universe. That is what gives birth to truth, to beauty, to peace, to joy, and to power. The law always reflects the mental attitude, and the mental attitude can be consciously transmuted from one of negation to one of affirmation. There is a unity of spirit and form, of mind and matter. Hence, there is an objective responsiveness in nature equivalent to the thought of humans. We get what we think. 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 Got it. We create our life experiences by how we see them. That's the law. We call it cause and effect. The cause is always mental. Always. Always, always. Seeing everything that happens in our lives through the lens of gratitude increases the likelihood that we will experience a life of heaven on earth as us. Seeing better, we know better, and we do better. So I'm going to close with a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, and then I'm going to read a poem by David White because I like it and I can. From F. Scott Fitzgerald, for what it's worth, it's never too late to be whoever you want to be. I hope you live a life you're proud of, and if you find you're not, I hope you have the strength, and I would add courage, to start over, because every single one of us is on our path to our awakening. And we get the chance to explore, express, experience, decide. Do that. And the most useful point of view is one of gratitude. And then, because I like the poem and it's November and I can, it's the poem by David White called Everything is Waiting for You. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witnesses to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely, even you, at times, have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must notice the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come, and the doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker on your phone is your dream ladder of divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle sings even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. And the birds and all the creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. Each one of us gets to do that. Each one of us gets to remember what heaven on earth looks like for us, as us, in us, through us, by us. Did I leave anything out? And we get to show that heaven on earth by being. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now it's time for the closing prayer. Well, not really quite, but closing-ish. So if I've said something useful for you, hold it in your mind while I speak these words of affirmation. I celebrate this thing called life. I know that it lives as me and lives as all. I know that it lives as God in form. And I know I get to put my particular spin on it. And I know that every single being gets to put their particular spin on how God shows up as them. And I know that in doing so, each one expresses their own particular flavor of heaven on earth. And I know that by sharing and doing and being, goodness on earth is increased. Beneficent joy is increased. Great goodness is increased. And even though it sometimes doesn't look like it, I know that all beings are God in form already. Every single one is already the beloved, seen by the beloved. Every single one already is divinity. So even when I might not automatically see that, I get to look again. I get to reframe my thought. I get to see myself and all others with God eyes and celebrate that presence of that one life that lives, moves, and has its being in all. Celebrating this magnificent, delightful, beautiful, joyful experience called life. I relax into it, I allow it, I receive it, and I let it be, and so it is.